I've always been interested in working with students with special needs, even before I started teaching. It's the volunteer work I did as a teenager. My first summer job was with a literacy tutoring program that our board ran. At the faculty, the instructions for this one credit course were, and I quote, "Find something connected to education and do it." So I investigated what was then called mainstreaming. And then as a teacher, once I got a reputation as being good at working with our students with special needs, they wound up in my classes often. This is my 14th year, I think, in the library, and I had 3 years part-time before that while I was still teaching other classes. When I first began working in the library, as I said, I'd had students from our Planning for Independence program for students with developmental disabilities in my classes. And so the teachers and ERWs asked me to keep working with these students to develop some sort of library program. And that was when we discovered that in our school, although these students weren't forbidden to use the library, they weren't welcome, they weren't regarded as library users. And I vowed that would change if I became the teacher librarian. So when I did become the teacher librarian, it changed. And so that's been the driving passion of my work. My focus, at least for many years, was the students in our Planning for Independence program, partly because I figured if I could include them, I could include anyone. Last summer, I attended one of those ministry sessions on differentiated instruction, so now my brain's working overtime on all sorts of things. Okay. A bit of background, since I think I'm the only teacher librarian in the room. Okay. The Ontario School Library Association does have a policy statement about school libraries and teacher librarians, and it's rather ambitious. School libraries are intended to be the core of a lifelong learning community, with teachers and teacher librarians collaborating. There's a focus on both traditional and emerging literacies and linkages and partnerships. So libraries are supposed to really be the center of the school, a very active place. And teacher librarians, according to the Ontario School Library Association, we have a threefold role: curriculum development and leadership, information management, and collaborative program planning and teaching. In Ontario, teacher librarians are certified teachers who then take additional qualifications courses. So just like a teacher might become qualified to teach special ed or French as a second language or ESL classes, you can take a 3-part AQ. I have my specialist in teacher librarianship, my specialist in special ed, because I regard teacher librarianship as a resource position. And a couple of years ago, I completed an MEd in teacher librarianship from the University of Alberta. It's the only program of its kind in Canada. When I think of inclusive teaching and learning, I want to consider for a moment the programs and the students, and then what it looks like in the school library, how a teacher librarian can support the classroom program, and how a teacher librarian can provide educational leadership. Now this assumes, of course, that you've got a teacher librarian in your school. Many school boards in Ontario no longer have teacher librarians, or maybe they're in secondary but not elementary, or they exist but they're part-time, or they're doing prep time coverage. This is not possible if you don't have a teacher librarian. So part of the background to this is that I'm sneaking in a little bit of advocacy for school libraries and teacher librarians. We're worth having around. So when I'm looking at inclusive teaching and learning, I'm trying to consider, as I say, my focus has largely been the Planning for Independence program, but I try to keep the whole spectrum in mind, right? There's the academic university courses, college applied, essential locally developed, which is the placement of choice for students with mild intellectual disabilities. Then there's open and mixed courses in which you get everybody. Then there are a variety of special education placements and programs. There's the resource class, which is generally what students with learning disabilities are encouraged to take. Planning for Independence program for students with intellectual disabilities. They tend to be divided into 2 groups, needs moderate, needs severe. The program at our school is a needs moderate. Our PIP students are verbal, mobile, not profoundly disabled. Many of these students can read and write some at a K to 1-2 level. We also have a communication program. There is some dispute right now about whether the communication program is for students with severe language impairments who might be autistic, or is it an autism program? It's supposed to be a program for students with severe language impairments. Many of the students, in fact, right now, all of the students in our communication program do have a ASD. And there are other programs that vary from school to school. English as a second language, of course, I teach in the GTA, so we have many new Canadians. In fact, so many that there's a settlement worker actually assigned to schools. Schools in our board, high schools, have settlement workers assigned. A level A English language learner has just arrived in Canada, speaks little to no English. But it's amazing how quickly they learn to come into the library and ask to sign out a computer. They can usually manage that by day 2. And then the level E students are transitioning into regular classes. They're approaching fluency. By level C, they should be able to handle young adult literature and should be doing okay. There's a variety of support programs and specialized programs. So there's a real range of students. And this is a fairly typical high school. Pocock has approximately 1,300 students. We were at 2,500 when I joined the staff. It's a fairly typical urban high school. A real variety of students, many new Canadians, lots of students with a variety of needs, not all of whom have been identified. One of the challenges, of course, is that when a student arrives new to Canada and doesn't speak the language, that student can't even be assessed, unless you can find someone to assess in the native language, can't even be assessed until there's enough language. But if the student has serious learning issues, then language learning is slower. It can be a real frustration. So we have students we know have special needs, although they can't be identified yet. I tend to divide my school library program into 3 pieces, and I know you are welcome at your library is really awkward, but the at your library phrase is a trademarked advocacy phrase that the Ontario School Library Association uses. So I decided to incorporate it, even though it makes the wording a bit awkward. The you're welcome at your library part, that's the orientation, basic library skills, how to use a library. Reading and learning, I used to have them as 2 separate things, reading for pleasure and then research and inquiry, but really the dividing line got kind of fuzzy, so that's one program. And then job skills development. So the orientation program, I introduce the students to the library use skills, basic computer skills, learn what's on the school network. For the grade 9s, for example, every grade 9 student, this year it was the period 2 classes came down and we did the orientation, it was a full period orientation. So they learned about the library, they learned a little bit of what was on the school network, for example, that they could use smart ideas, and then they answered some questions and created a Word document, so we knew that every student could at least do the basic typing and formatting because teachers expect documents to be word processed, and not every student knows how. There was an online quiz. I adapt that program for the GLE, locally developed, and the ESL students. For our students with special needs, PIP students, communication, a 1-period orientation isn't enough. It's not really enough for anyone, but for those students, it's really not enough. So I have a more extensive, ongoing program that teaches library vocabulary, library use skills. The idea being that eventually these students should be able to use the public library for leisure and lifelong learning. Now, some of them will need support from a community worker or whatever. Others will be able to use it on their own. But that's the idea, that they can take the skills they're learning about using a library and use the public library. For the reading and learning program, the goals include literacy skills, the love of reading, creating a culture of literacy and reading in the school. Helping students learn the research and inquiry skills, critical thinking skills, with the goal of becoming lifelong learners. Again, so it's beyond our library. Right? This is what helps them in their classes and what they can take with them when they graduate. The reading program, all the way from the use of picture books, which are great for using with students with special needs or ESL students. Picture books definitely belong in high school. They can be used in just about any course at any level. Collaborative novel studies, assistance with book selections, book talks. I picked up an idea at the library conference a couple of years ago, and so now there's a number of classes doing the ORCA Challenge. ORCA publishes several series of novels, imprints, ORCA Soundings, ORCA Currents, ORCA Sports. They're written at a grade 2 to 4 level, but they're written for teenagers. They're not junior novels, they're teen novels. And so I have 2 or 3 classes this semester where we're challenging the students to read. In one case, it's 3, and the others it's 5 novels over the course of the semester. The idea being that we know from 100 years worth of research that the best way to become a better reader is to read more. And the Orca novels are really, really good for these kids. Subject-related fiction, this year we don't have a student book club. There wasn't enough interest, but we do have a staff book club. And I also try to run the Ontario Library Association Forest of Reading programs. White Pine is their high school program. It's like a Teen Choice Award for new teen novels. Golden Oak is an adult literacy program. We actually ran the program 1 year, but it doesn't fit the school year very well. So since then, what we've done is buy all of the books, set up a Golden Oak shelf in our library, and encourage the Ontario literacy course teachers, ESL teachers, and so on to use those books, because they're designed for adult literacy learners. So they're designed to be accessible and of interest to our older students while being easier to read. And of course, research and inquiry, this is a big part of what libraries do. Again, I see all the grade 9 students. This year it was a 1-period orientation, academic honesty and research skills, but it's too much to do in 1 period, so next year I'm going to split it into 2. I see them in different periods. So period 2 is the orientation to the library. Period 3 is the introduction to research. Period 4 is the introduction to academic honesty. So they have to be separate modules because, of course, the students don't all come in order, depends on what classes they're in. But by the end of the orientation period, I've seen every grade 9 student 2, next year it'll be 3 times, and they've got the package. I do adapted sessions for ESL students and provide ongoing instruction and support, individual and whole class, like citation lessons. The teachers of senior classes will often ask me to teach the students how to do parenthetical referencing, for example, or the grade 9-10 teachers will want the students to learn how to do works cited, use the MLA citation style. I've taught note-taking, whatever the teachers want me to teach. If a teacher actually is interested in collaboratively developing an assignment or a project, then I offer to share the marking as well. So if I've taught the students how to do works cited, and if the teacher wants me to, then I'll actually mark the works cited portion. So I've got a stack of 2 classes worth of grade 9 assignments on my desk at the moment. The teacher's marking the poster, the science content. I'm marking all of the process work and the works cited. I also have a stack of grade 11 biology assignments. We've developed a major research project. In fact, 5% of it, the research process, is 5% of the student's semester grade, and the research essay is their 5% culminating performance task. I mark all of the process work and citation work, and the teacher marks the science content and the actual essay. Okay. Whereas with other teachers, what I provide is simply a pathfinder. Tell students where they can find information. Okay. Different teachers are interested in different levels of involvement. The students in the communication class this year have been coming in every week, in addition to whatever else we're doing, every week for an information, we're trying to develop an information digital literacy program for them. The third component of my program is the job skills development. We have interested students can apply to be student clerks. This is just regular students who need, usually they want volunteer hours, so they can work with us in the library, shelving, shelf reading, that sort of thing. We have actually had 1 co-op student. There's not a whole lot of co-op students who want placements in school libraries, but if they do, we're there. And I usually, every year, not necessarily every semester, but normally every year, I get a student from the Planning for Independence program for a semester doing a workplace experience placement. These are students generally who are not yet ready for a placement outside the school, so they do one with me. And I just brought a little bit of the workplace experience material, but generally, in addition to working in the library, because I'm a teacher, I work in a resource component. So we do research projects, we work on literacy, numeracy, money, telling time, all those sorts of things. And the goal of the workplace experience placement is to prepare the student for a placement outside of school, and eventually, of course, the goal is for some of the students to prepare them for employment. Because some of the students in the Planning for Independence program with appropriate supports are employable. And we have a student library clerk program.